Developing right now on Morning News Now, an ongoing shutdown standoff in Washington, leaving the entire country on edge. This morning, Senate lawmakers still at odds over a funding bill that would reopen the government. Now the Trump administration warning federal workers could be laid off as early as today.
How does this end? Well, it ends when the Senate Democrats pick this bill up, passed by the House of Representatives, and vote for it.
Democrats are holding firm because we're standing up for the health care of everyday Americans.
We'll have the latest from the nation's capital. Developing this morning, emergency on the coast. Several waterfront homes along North Carolina's Outer Banks collapsing into the ocean as a pair of powerful storms churn offshore. Now parts of the East Coast at risk from dangerous surf and rip currents. We're tracking it all. Plus, understanding autism, the new research offering a closer look at the condition, the array of differences contained within the diagnosis, and how genetics could play a role. And she was iconic and inspirational. This morning, we're remembering renowned primatologist Jane Goodall with a look back on her life's work and how it transformed the way we see the world. Good morning. I'm Christine Romans in for Joe in Savannah this morning. We begin this morning with politicians pointing fingers over that government shutdown as the White House threatens to make permanent cuts to federal workers and projects. President Trump posting on Truth Social, quote, Republicans must use this opportunity of Democrat-forced closure to clear out deadwood, waste, and fraud. Some federal workers are now waiting for imminent layoff notices, while others could soon be furloughed or forced to work without pay unless the government reopens. Two more votes failed to clear procedural hurdles in the Senate yesterday on the funding bills that the Republican-controlled House passed earlier this week. The Senate is out of session today due to the Yom Kippur holiday. The earliest any votes could come next is Friday afternoon. It comes as the White House points to a New York Times poll out this week. It shows 65% of Americans said Democrats should not shut down the government, even if their demands aren't met. Still, some Democrats say federal workers are behind them, at least for now.
They may be the strongest group yet saying, you got to push back. Now, the question will become, will they have that same view 3 weeks from now? I don't know.
NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba is standing by with more on what the Trump administration is saying. But first, let's go to our Capitol Hill correspondent, Melanie Zanona, for the latest from Congress. Mel, good morning. So the Senate reconvenes tomorrow. How are Republicans trying to get the remaining Democratic votes they need in order to reopen the government?
Yeah, good morning, Christine. The Republican strategy here is to just keep holding votes to open the government over and over again. The hope among Republicans is that the pressure is going to grow on Democrats, especially as the shutdown drags on and as the impacts are starting to be felt by the American people. And so far, 3 Senate Democrats have voted to support the GOP plan to keep the government funded through November 21st, both on Tuesday and yesterday when they took those votes. They're planning to vote again Friday on that exact same bill. So we'll be watching to see if any additional Senate Democrats break. They need 8 Democrats total to join Republican forces in order to pass this bill. But as of right now, Democrats see very little incentive to cave, at least this early in the fight. They are still pushing very much for an extension of those Obamacare subsidies that are set to expire at the end of this year. And while there's no leadership discussions at the moment about a deal and the two sides are not talking, there was notably a bipartisan huddle on the Senate floor yesterday during one of those votes. And the lawmakers involved, their rank and file members, they told us that they were kind of just spitballing ideas, talking about ways potentially to reopen the government. So there clearly is a desire among the rank and file to find a way out of this. It is still very early, though, and we are still a far way away from any potential deal, Christine.
We're now seeing this message battle, right, between the Democrats and Republicans over who gets the blame for the shutdown. I want to play something the Vice President, J.D. Vance, said using a misleading claim that's become a Republican talking point. Let's listen to some of that, and we'll talk on the other side.
What they have done instead is to shut down the government because we won't give billions of dollars to health care funding for illegal aliens. That is what has actually happened. They said to us, we will open the government, but only if you give billions of dollars of funding for health care for illegal aliens. That's a ridiculous proposition.
So Vance is talking about Democrats there, but I want to be very clear. U.S. law prohibits federal health care benefits for undocumented immigrants. It's illegal. And Democrats say they are not trying to change that law. So what are the facts here?
Yeah, that's exactly right. This is a false claim. It's misleading at best. As you mentioned, Democrats are pushing to extend Obamacare subsidies and to restore cuts to Medicaid that were included in Trump's mega law earlier this summer. But they are not trying to change the eligibility requirements. As of right now, under federal law, undocumented immigrants are not allowed to receive Medicaid. They're not allowed to receive Obamacare subsidies. The one thing that is in the Democratic plan is that they do support health care for something known as legally known lawful immigrants. So people that are very much documented, that are trying to go through the legal system with the court system. So they are not undocumented. They're people think like dreamers, for example. Those people are people that Democrats do want to give health care to, but they are not trying to give any health care to illegal immigrants. But I think it does show that for Republicans, they don't feel like they have a strong argument when it comes to health care. So they're trying to put an issue that is front and center with their base, which is illegal immigration. But this is just another example of the messaging war that we're seeing back and forth between the two parties.
Those health care subsidies, if they are allowed to expire, as they are going to expire, health care costs would spike for millions of people next year. Before we go, I know you've been keeping an eye on how all this is impacting federal workers. What's the latest there?
Yeah, so obviously in a shutdown, thousands of federal workers are either going to be furloughed or they're going to be forced to work without pay. And now the stakes are even higher because the Trump administration is planning to make this as politically painful as possible as a way to try to prod Democrats into acting. I was told that yesterday there was a House conference call with House Republicans, and the budget director actually informed Republicans that they're planning in the next 1 to 2 days to carry out mass layoffs of the federal workforce. That would be permanent. So on top of already a disastrous shutdown, which will have impacts not just here in D.C., but all around the country, now potentially adding on top of that, you're going to have people losing their jobs altogether. The federal workforce has already been demoralized from the DOGE cuts earlier this year. So it's really shaping up to be quite a nightmare for federal workforce.
All right, Mel, thanks for that. Let's now bring in NBC News White House correspondent Monica Alba. Monica, good morning to you. So in an unprecedented piece of politicization, several federal agencies are putting the blame for the shutdown squarely on Senate Democrats. The agencies doing that. This is a big contrast from how departments have dealt with shutdowns in the past. Usually they just kind of give you the nuts and bolts of how the agency is going to operate, or not operate in a shutdown. How is the Trump administration using government websites and emails to politicize what's happening here? Walk me through your reporting.
Yeah, Christine, this is notable because typically it would be pretty boilerplate, straightforward language that is nonpartisan. But we are seeing everything but, with examples on those websites that are official government sites with large banners across the top. For instance, the Housing and Urban Development website had a message that you see there that would pop up that said, the radical left in Congress shut down the government. HUD will use all available funds. The State Department did the same thing. And then over at HHS and at the Department of Labor, we know that some employees were offered language that they were asked to put on their out-of-office replies that similarly had some of this partisan messaging that blamed Democrats for the shutdown and that essentially said, I won't be able to respond until Senate Democrats support the House-passed stopgap funding bill or another measure. And again, that's highly unusual and different from how we've seen messaging in past shutdowns, but it really takes a page from what the White House has been doing and what they have tried to do even on whitehouse.gov, on that official government website, which is to play a montage of Democrats and their own comments about trying not to shut down the government. And again, squarely placing the blame on them. And we've also seen this in some other language. And again, we should just point out, it is really, really unusual since these agencies are supposed to be nonpartisan, in particular, these civil servants who aren't political appointees in some of these cases are being asked to amplify the same messaging.
And New York City is being targeted directly by the government shutdown. White House Budget Director Russell Vought posting on X that $18 billion in funding for infrastructure projects was paused to ensure the money was not, quote, flowing based on unconstitutional DEI principles. What should we know about that decision and how New York City could be affected?
Yeah, these are two major projects that people who live in New York, where you are right now, are pretty familiar with. This is the Hudson Tunnel project and the Second Avenue subway project, infrastructure projects that have wanted this kind of funding, some of which was allocated and secured in the Biden administration through that infrastructure law, and that they have been trying to do a lot of work on, that now the Trump administration is saying that is frozen as they evaluate, and they have put some of the people who were in charge of that on furlough, and that's why they cannot work on it through the Department of Transportation right now as well. And the OMB director has signaled, Christine, that there could be more to come, that they're going to look at some of these other programs, and there could be potential patterns and more of this. But when we talk about New York specifically, that directly impacts, of course, Leader Chuck Schumer, Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who both represent New York. And so that is a specific angle there that's important to point out, too.
And Monica, we heard yesterday from the Supreme Court regarding President Trump's effort to fire Lisa Cook as a board member of the Federal Reserve. The High Court ruling that she can stay in office and do her job, at least for now. Walk us through this decision and where this goes from here.
Yeah, remember that she had sued the federal government, saying that she didn't believe it was appropriate or correct for her to be fired. Remember that the Trump administration had made these claims and allegations about mortgage fraud, which she and her team of lawyers have denied. Well, now the Supreme Court is saying that she can stay in her position for now, at least for the next couple of months, and oral arguments will be set for January. And the White House, for their part, says they believe they will be victorious when this is heard in January. But for now, it is important for the Fed's independence, according to the lawyers, that she can stay in this position on the Board of Governors, at least for now.
All right, Monica Alba, thank you so much for that. In economic news, there are more worrying signs for the job market after private payrolls saw their biggest drop in 2.5 years in September. Private companies shed 32,000 jobs during the month. That's according to payroll management company ADP. Markets had expected to see a growth in jobs. The numbers raised new concerns about the economy amid the ongoing government shutdown. Here to talk more about this is Investopedia's editor-in-chief, my friend Caleb Silver. Caleb, so more evidence of a rough patch in the job market from that ADP report.
Yeah, losses when a lot of people were expecting gains, and now the cloud gets a little cloudier because we're probably not going to get the September payrolls report tomorrow because the BLS is shut down. So flying blind a little bit when it comes to knowing what's happening in the labor market, but we do know that it's deteriorating. We've seen that with the revisions over the past year and over the past few months. And this ADP private payrolls report, it's only 10% of companies that use private payrolls, but still a pretty good snapshot of the fact that things are actually weakening more than a lot of people expected.
Yeah, in normal times, as you mentioned, we would see that jobs report from the Bureau of Labor Statistics tomorrow. It's the first Friday of the month, right? But BLS is dark because of a government shutdown. Unless the government reopens today, which I don't think anybody expects will happen, that report is not going to be prepared. What does this mean, do you think, for the Federal Reserve when it meets at the end of the month? Is it flying blind here? It has other gauges it looks at, I'm sure.
It has other gauges, but it'll miss this, and it'll probably miss the next inflation report if the government doesn't reopen the CPI report that's due out next week. So it'll be missing two key important pieces of data as it thinks about what to do next with interest rates. A lot of people are expecting at least one more interest rate cut this year, maybe another quarter point cut that might come at the December meeting. But without the data, the Fed doesn't really know what to do and can't really make that decision, but it still might go forward with that at the end of the month. There's a lot of time between now and then, and a lot can happen. That said, when you look at what the Fed has to deal with, they're dealing with a labor market that's weakening and prices that are rising due to tariffs, caught in a really strange place right there. But at the same time, companies without this data are having a hard time making decisions. If a lot of companies rely on that government data, on the employment data, to make decisions about hiring and about expansion plans, they won't have that either.
Caleb, bigger picture, how do you see the government shutdown affecting the broader economy and financial markets? I mean, markets kind of shrugged it off yesterday. Historically, they tend to, maybe there's a disruption, a little bit of disruption, but they move through it. The bigger impact is really on, I guess, Main Street, right? And people who hold jobs that might be affected by potential layoffs here.
Absolutely. So we're talking about federal employees being on furlough, and they'll eventually get back pay if and when the shutdown ends, and if they're not fully terminated through a lot of these threats. But what you see is a slowdown in GDP and gross domestic product, which really comes from spending. In 2018, we saw a slowdown of about 0.5% in GDP, but you feel it when you actually are on furlough and you miss a paycheck. That's a problem. You miss 2 paychecks, it becomes a crisis for a lot of people. And then there's the private contractors tied to government agencies that will be shut down. They may be furloughed as well. So you get this domino effect of people not getting their paychecks, not spending, that ultimately slows the economy, and that could lead to stagflation, potentially a recession if it lasts long enough. The stock market doesn't care because investors are used to this type of dysfunction with our government. But for real people in the economy, especially those most vulnerable, this could become a crisis.
Yeah, rent is due, the mortgage has to be paid, student loans have to be paid, the car payment comes even if there's not a paycheck or it comes retroactively. Caleb Silver, so nice to see you. Thank you. All right, from Rome, Pope Leo is weighing in on President Trump's handling of immigration across the country. The Pope publicly calling the Trump administration's treatments of immigrants here in the U.S. inhuman. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has more on how the White House is responding.
For the first time since celebrating his inaugural Mass, the American Pope from Chicago weighing in on U.S. politics. Pope Leo seeming to criticize the Trump administration over the president's immigration policies.
Someone who says that I'm against abortion, but I'm in agreement with the inhuman treatment of immigrants who are in the United States. I don't know if that's pro-life. So they're very complex issues. I don't know if anyone has all the truth on them. But I would ask first and foremost that there be greater respect for one another.
The rare remarks coming after his predecessor, Pope Francis, also slammed the president's crackdown on illegal immigration. Tonight, the White House pushing back on Pope Leo's comments.
You've been very open about your Catholic faith. How do you respond to that?
I would reject there is inhumane treatment of illegal immigrants in the United States under this administration. There was, however, significant inhumane treatment of illegal immigrants in the previous administration as they were being trafficked and raped and beaten, and in many cases killed, over our United States southern border.
Pope Leo also said President Trump's rebranding of the Department of Defense to the Department of War was concerning. But he did show support for the president's proposed peace plan for Gaza, calling it realistic and saying he hoped that it would be accepted.
All right, there's breaking news out of England this morning where a major incident has been declared after a car and stabbing attack at a synagogue on Yom Kippur. 4 people were injured in the attack in Manchester. 2 have since succumbed to their injuries and died. According to the city's mayor, police were called to the Heaton Park Synagogue by someone who witnessed a car being driven toward members of the public there and saw one man stabbed. The mayor said the suspect was shot by police. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said he was, quote, appalled by the attack in a post on X, adding that the fact that this has taken place on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, makes it all the more horrific. The investigation into this attack is ongoing, and we'll bring you more details later this morning. An investigation is underway this morning after 2 regional planes clipped each other while taxiing at LaGuardia Airport here in New York. The incident happened just before 10 p.m. last night when Delta Airlines says 2 of their Delta connection flights made contact with each other. Preliminary information shows the wing of a plane that was set to depart made contact with the fuselage of the plane taxiing to its arrival gate. 1 minor injury reported. This is the latest incident involving close calls or collisions of passenger aircraft this year. In a statement, Delta said that the safety of employees and passengers comes before all else and that they were cooperating with the relevant authorities. This morning, Hurricane Imelda is weakening as it pushes out to sea, but not before leaving its mark on the Outer Banks of North Carolina. Powerful waves from the storm have ripped several oceanfront homes from their foundations, washing them into the sea. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has the latest.
In Buxton, North Carolina, these homes were no match for Mother Nature. The stormy surf causing 5 houses to collapse in less than an hour before a 6th was destroyed. Officials say the homes were unoccupied following damage this summer from Hurricane Erin. More appear to be in danger.
I looked down at my cell phone, thanks to social media, and saw my house falling in the ocean. It was shocking.
Christy Roberson called her home Infinity and says it was the most special place in the world.
My moments in Infinity and the moments shared there will always be the love story.
The devastation was triggered by Hurricanes Umberto and Imelda, which are lashing the East Coast with massive waves. For years, the Outer Banks have been hampered by erosion from storms and rising sea levels, driven by climate change.
If you had been at any one of these properties 10, 15 years ago, you would have had to take a football field walk to get to the beach. But we've had that erosion process taking place for the many decades.
Since 2020, 18 different houses have collapsed in the area, according to the National Park Service. Some deciding to literally pick up their homes and move inland. Communities have also used sand to reinforce beaches, but those are only temporary fixes as oceans rise and storms get stronger. Jesse Kirsch, NBC News.
What pictures? All right, as the surf continues to churn up and down the East Coast, let's get a check on your morning news now weather. NBC meteorologist Angie Lastman tracking some rainy days for the Sunshine State. Angie, good morning.
Hi, Christine. Good morning. The Sunshine State not living up to its name over the next couple of days. You're exactly right. We've got some showers and thunderstorms already in the picture early this morning, and especially hugging the East Coast. That's going to be kind of the general vicinity, but of course, that onshore breeze is going to push all of that activity across the state as the next couple of days go on. So here's a look at your day today. Again, local downpours likely. We'll see that potential because we have multiple days of heavy downpours, the potential will be there for isolated flash flooding. So a heads up for folks that live across this region. You're going to be in and out of this essentially as the weekend goes on. And between now and then, we could pick up a good dose of rain. In some spots, again, especially closer to the East Coast, you're going to see anywhere from 3 to 5 inches, maybe some isolated amounts higher than that. So heads up for bringing the umbrella, and then, of course, watching for the flooding that occurs, especially in those areas that you oftentimes see flooding when we have a rainy period across this region. Otherwise, we've got to take one look at Hurricane Imelda. It is still maintaining Category 1 hurricane strength. It's about right now 170 miles to the east-northeast of Bermuda. Overnight, that island, of course, dealing with the worst of the impacts from this system. Now it is, of course, pulling away, and we'll start to see conditions improving significantly as the day goes on. So they have a little more time where they're likely still dealing with a little bit of rain, obviously the rough surf nearby, that kind of situation along the coast, but the potential for some gusty winds still there as well. But between now and essentially later today, we'll see this system weaken, and then we will no more be worried about Imelda here as we go through the next couple of days. One thing to note, if you live across New England, grabbing the extra layer is going to be handy this morning. We've got the frost advisories and the freeze warnings up across much of this region. We saw the same kind of scenario yesterday. A little bit warmer in some spots, but still needing that extra layer for sure. We've got some 20s, some 30s, some 40s out there. So feeling much like fall across that region. A very different story across most of the middle of the country. You look anywhere from the Rockies to the Ohio Valley, from the Northern Plains to the Gulf Coast, and we've got temperatures running warm. It's 90s across Texas, upper 80s for Kansas City today. And if you're looking for some relief tomorrow and maybe wanting to feel like fall, well, you don't get it if you're in the Northern Plains, because we have a chance for record warmth. We've got upper 80s to mid 80s expected across a good chunk of the Midwest. We've still got the 90s for Texas. And essentially, we roll into the weekend and this upcoming work week, and there is no sign of fall. We've still got the high 80s in a lot of these spots, Christine, low 80s in Raleigh. I think if you're looking for the cool air in New York City or Philadelphia, it's upper 70s is all you're going to get.
So you don't have to change any closets yet.
That's right.
You know, no work
Keep
on the closets.
Short sleeves out.
All right. Thanks, Angie. Nice to see you.
You too.
All right. This morning, the world is remembering renowned primate researcher Jane Goodall, a trailblazer who ventured into the wild to study chimpanzees, and in the process taught the world about the interplay of animals, nature, and humankind. Many Americans came to know her through National Geographic specials, remember, that brought her research right into their living rooms. Goodall died at the age of 91. Here's NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson with a look back at her life and legacy.
It was perhaps a basic instinct that chimpanzees recognized they had a friend in Jane Goodall, the young British woman with little scientific training who went to Tanzania in 1960 and changed the way we look at these great apes by doing everything established scientists thought was wrong.
When I got to Cambridge finally, they were totally horrified. I'd named the chimps instead of numbering them. I talked about them having personalities. I talked about them having minds and being able to have rational thoughts and emotions, happiness, sadness, fear. And all of these things were supposed to be attributes only of humans.
She discovered the chimps could make tools, described wars between groups of chimps, and captivated the world.
Fortunately, when I was a child, I had a great teacher who taught me that in this respect, these erudite scientists were completely wrong, and that was my dog, Rusty.
The child that fell in love with Tarzan of the Apes, as an adult, conducted her research by immersing herself in the chimp's habitat for endless hours of observation, building trust with her subjects.
Being out in the wild, you know, back when I dreamed of it, there was nobody doing anything like that.
Goodall devoted her life to the protection of the chimps and the earth, fighting against the destruction of forests and, more recently, climate change that threaten this endangered species.
If all around the world the importance of protecting and restoring forests was understood, that would go a long way towards mitigating the effects of climate change.
Goodall married twice and had one son, but her lasting legacy is the relationship forged in the wild.
I want to be remembered for having helped people to understand the true nature of animals, that they do matter as individuals, that they do have a part to play in the scheme of things, and they're not just objects, they're beings, and they're part of it.
Teaching us about chimpanzees and ourselves. Ann Thompson, NBC News.
What a legacy. All right, much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, scientists at NASA facing an out-of-this-world dilemma over what to do about a massive asteroid that might just hit the moon. Why researchers are even considering a nuclear explosion. But up first, developing news, Israeli forces intercept aid flotilla boats nearing the coast of Gaza. The latest next. We'll be right back. We are back with new developments on the global Samud flotilla that's attempting to break Israel's blockade of aid into Gaza. Last night, Israeli forces began intercepting and seizing boats that were closing in on the devastated Palestinian enclave, sparking condemnation and protests around the world. This camera footage shows the moment Israeli commandos boarded one of the boats and pointed their guns at the crew, forcing them to kneel with their hands up. Organizers say 39 boats were intercepted by Israel. Around 500 activists, politicians, and lawyers from around the world are part of this flotilla, which is trying to bring much-needed food and medicine into Gaza. Among those captured is climate activist Greta Thunberg. Israel says it's taking her and others to Israel, where they're expected to be deported back to their home countries. Organizers say one vessel is still sailing toward Gaza. In the Philippines, first responders are racing to save survivors this morning after a devastating 6.9 magnitude earthquake hit that island nation. According to the Philippine news agency, at least 70 people have been killed, more than 290 injured since the disaster struck late Tuesday night. Those numbers now expected to climb based on the sheer scale of destruction there. NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Freyer has the story.
The deadliest earthquake to hit the Philippines in over a decade, and the destruction is vast. On the island of Cebu, search teams are combing through rubble as authorities race to get essential aid to those who need it. Videos on social media showing when the powerful magnitude 6.9 earthquake hit. People seen clinging to each other. The top of this parish building crashing to the ground. At the Miss Pacific contest, people scrambling to hide under tables. One of the hardest hit areas was the city of Bogo, where images showed side by side lining the street and makeshift hospitals struggling to treat the injured. Rescuers are using whatever tools they have to pull away concrete and debris to recover bodies. Among the dead here, this man's wife and son. I went around the rubble and kept calling out their names, he said, touching the bag holding his loved one's body. Officials have declared a state of calamity. The Philippines vulnerable to disasters like this, sitting on the geological fault known as the Ring of Fire. But rescue efforts are being hampered by broken roads and bridges, heavy rain, and multiple aftershocks, with the death toll expected to rise even higher. Janice Mackey-Freyer, NBC News, Beijing.
All right, coming up on Morning News Now, teens helping teens in a time of crisis.
Many of my calls have been about relationship issues, school stress, anxiety, maybe a fight with their parents.
When we come back, the new program linking young people looking for someone to talk to with volunteers who can better relate. Welcome back. This morning, we're taking a look at a first-of-its-kind study that analyzed the effect of genetics on autism diagnosis. The report, which was published in the journal Nature yesterday, found that autism is not a single disorder with one root cause. It's actually an umbrella term for a group of conditions with similar features. NBC News medical contributor Dr. John Torres is here with more on this. Dr. Torres, good morning. This is so much important and fascinating in here. This was the first study to link a genetic profile to the timing of an autism diagnosis. Why is that important?
And, for years we've been talking about the autism spectrum, and we knew that variety, the people that with autism had different episodes on the spectrum, different areas on the spectrum, and some had severe autism, some had less severe autism, Asperger's, these types of conditions. But what we didn't really understand the genetics behind it and the wide spectrum that is actually out there. And what this study showed us, it was a study looking at 45,000 people in the UK. They have what's called a biobank, and they looked at them, looked at their genetic profiles, and they found out that those that were diagnosed with autism ended up having a huge variety in their genetic profiles. And this variety differed whether they were diagnosed as children versus diagnosed as adults or late teenagers. And what this showed is that there are huge differences here. There are huge varieties here. It truly is a spectrum. And you can't pigeonhole it and say one thing caused it and it's one type of condition.
Yeah, it might be multiple causes. With a genetic background, there's quite a bit of political discourse around autism, of course, and what causes it. The timing of this report, I think, is significant. What else should people take away from this?
And the timing is significant because we are understanding more and more as time goes on. When I was in high school, when I was in elementary school, we really didn't know much about autism, and we really didn't have classmates that were diagnosed with autism back then. Now it's fairly more common, and what we're learning is not exactly, but we're understanding more about this, and we're understanding that diagnosing it is important because then they can go ahead and get treatment. But the other thing the study is showing us is that diagnosis could be different based on whether they get diagnosed as a child or later in life. With children, they tend to not have those mental health issues or ADHD. The ones that are diagnosed more in adults tend to have more ADHD and the mental health issues, and that seems to have a genetic component. And so we're learning more that genetic component is very important.
In a separate report from the JAMA Network, it found that autism diagnosis among adults between 26 and 34 more than quadrupled from 2011 to 2022. That's a 450% increase. Why are we seeing more people get diagnosed later in life?
So one of the reasons is because we're understanding it more. And so more people are saying, maybe this is something that I need to get looked into because I've always felt a little different than those around me. I don't associate with people as well. The other thing, to be honest, is the stigma behind autism is going away. And so people are saying, I want to get diagnosed. I want to get treated. It's okay to tell people I have autism now, where it wasn't okay 10, 15, 20 years ago. And I think that has a huge step forward of people saying, as a child, I had these symptoms, but people ignored it, especially girls. We tend to ignore those symptoms, and now as an adult, I think I have this. Let me check it out.
So maybe not autism more prevalent, but people getting diagnosed.
The diagnosis is more prevalent. People are going to get diagnosed more often.
Research shows that adult diagnoses are more common in women than in men. That's so interesting. Why is it, do you think?
How much time do we have? Because
I know.
There's a lot of things going on here. Number one, girls tend to mask autism symptoms. With boys, it tends to be that rocking back and forth. With girls, it could be twirling of hair, which can be common for girls to do. And so people don't look at it as like that might be an autism symptom. They might need to go get that looked at. On top of that, if you look at all the studies for autism, okay, those are the ones we need to look at. We understand symptoms, and if we see that, that's who needs to get diagnosed or needs to be checked. So we didn't quite understand the girls and the women's symptoms. We the autism spectrum in them. We're starting to understand that more, and we're starting to look at it more. And like I said, the stigma is going away, so they're starting to come out more.
So much of the political discussion is about what you can or cannot do to prevent, or it's much more complicated.
But bottom line, much more common. There's no one cause. It's a huge spectrum, both in diagnosis and in conditions.
All right, Dr. John Torres, nice to see you. Thank you so much. All right, every day after school, a group of high school students come together at the Los Angeles offices of Teenline. It's a national hotline run by teens for other teens who are experiencing a crisis. The nonprofit is available at a time when the CDC says nearly 40% of high schoolers have reported persistent feelings of sadness or hopelessness over the past decade. NBC News correspondent Camila Bernal spoke to some of the volunteers.
Hi, this is Teenline. What's your name?
It's a call, a text, or an email without judgment.
I'm going to use that one right there.
Where teenagers are on both ends of the line.
Talking to a teen, especially an anonymous teen, like, we're not going to try to solve your problems. We're going to, like, mainly empathize and hear you out.
Brooke is 16. She's a volunteer in Los Angeles at Teenline, a hotline for teenagers in crisis across the world. And reach outs have been on the rise.
Yeah, I have a couple of resources for them.
This year alone, they're expected to connect with over 10,000 teens.
A lot of people, when they hear Teenline or hotline, they think, oh, suicide call, crisis call. But so many of my calls have been about relationship issues, school stress, anxiety, maybe a fight with their parents.
Oftentimes, she can relate.
For a lot of teens, I know that they had a hard time during the pandemic, which is also what drew me to Teenline. So I thought that if there's some way that I could, like, help teens not feel that way, then I want to do it.
And it's working.
89% of the youth that call or text or email us have said that they feel better at the end of the call.
Lynn Morris is the CEO of Didi Hirsch Mental Health Services, which runs Teenline. It's available for any teenager in the world from 6 to 10 p.m. Pacific time.
If we can get to kids before a major crisis happens and get them talking and learning how to reach out for support when they need it, the better off they'll be in the long term as well.
Teenline's increasing number of reach outs coming at the same time government spending cuts and policy changes have impacted other mental health services. But here, private donations allow for about a dozen of the more than 100 high school volunteers to shuffle in for their shift. They're always supervised by adults.
You definitely create and establish coping skills that help you leave it here and not bring it home with you.
They all go through a thorough selection process and 65 hours of training.
It can be exhausting, but in one of the most rewarding ways, because you just know that you've put your energy and your time towards something that really matters and that's made an impact.
A chance to grow while saving lives.
Being able to listen to someone and empathize with them and not try to fix their problems is, like, you know, all I can do, and, like, it makes being on the line so worth it.
Camila Bernal, NBC News, Los Angeles.
If you or anyone you know is struggling, you can call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. Coming up, housing hope. The recent interest rate cut could be signaling a shift for the housing market. What buyers and sellers need to know. And we're back with a look at the housing market. Both buyers and sellers are struggling with high mortgage rates and even higher prices. But the recent interest rate cut by the Federal Reserve is giving some people new hope. NBC News business and data correspondent Brian Chung explains why.
Did you miss the boat on 3% interest rates? Well, you can still find that cheap rate in some parts of the country. Like in Texas, where this home builder is offering under 2% the first year, under 3% the second year, less than 4% in year 3, and less than 5% for the rest of the mortgage. It's the latest play by some home builders to attract buyers with such deals in a slow market. In fact, 65% of them offered some sort of incentive last month, according to the National Association of Home Builders.
The housing market right now is slow, and that's both the pace of home sales, but also the pace of construction certainly has slowed over the last couple of months.
The reason, an icing out of home buyers who balked at high mortgage rates that hovered near 7% toward the beginning of this year. That as home sale prices were still at record highs, although many well under the original asking prices.
The housing market right now is an affordability constrained market, and that'll happen when you have home prices on a national basis go up 40-45% during the pandemic housing boom.
But that means finally a bit more leverage for some of those willing to buy during this double whammy of higher mortgage rates and higher prices. This summer marked the strongest buyer's market since 2013, according to Redfin.
This affordability environment is still very much strained. And so what that's translated into is a low level of existing home sales.
New homes are also sitting on the market, with the number of unsold new finished houses at the highest level since 2009. The shift to a buyer's market isn't happening everywhere. A good chunk of these homes are in regions of the country that experienced booms during the pandemic, places like Texas and Florida.
We're seeing a higher inventory in some of those markets. So in order to move that inventory so it's not sitting there idle, home builders are going to offer incentives.
Incentives like that buy-down deal where a developer offers a lower interest rate if you use their preferred lender.
Builder spends $30,000, $40,000, even $50,000 or more.
Which could mean $30,000, $40,000, or $50,000 in savings for some home buyers. That might be 10% or even more of the price of the home. There are some catches, like the fact that often those interest rates are only discounted for a few years, after which they get higher. There can be upfront fees associated with getting that buy down too. The advice, double check that you can afford those mortgage payments even after those cheaper interest rates expire. The popularity of these big buy downs may change as the housing market thaws, with 30-year mortgage rates slipping. But until then, for buyers iced out of the market the last few years, some encouraging signs you might be able to score a deal. Brian Chung, NBC News.
All right, staying on your wallet, Apple is reportedly refocusing on its future of vision. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us now with that and other Wall Street headlines. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Christine. Good morning to you. Yeah, so Apple reportedly paused an overhaul of its Vision Pro headset to focus on competing with Meta. So according to Bloomberg, the company's plans to release a cheaper, lighter variant of its headset were called off last week to accelerate work on smart glasses. Meta just released its $800 Ray-Ban display glasses, which are equipped with artificial intelligence. Bloomberg also reports Apple is now trying to move up the timeline for competing smart glasses, which were due for release in 2028. Artificial intelligence leader OpenAI has reached a valuation of $500 billion, pushing it past Elon Musk's SpaceX as the world's largest startup. So a person familiar with the transaction tells CNBC OpenAI finalized a secondary sale, allowing current and former employees to sell $6.6 billion stock to investors. That pushed it to that $500 billion mark, and it was past previous valuations of $300 billion, which the company hit during a SoftBank financing round earlier this year. Meanwhile, Elon Musk is the first person to hit a $500 billion net worth. According to Forbes Billionaires Index, the Tesla CEO reached that milestone briefly on Wednesday. Musk is benefiting from a rebound in Tesla shares, which are up more than 14% so far this year, Christine.
Wow, $500 billion man. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, Silvana, thank you so much. I could do it for just $1 billion. I could live on $1 billion. All right, in California, there's an urgent search for 2 trained hawks stolen days ago near SoFi Stadium. The hawks were taught to circle the sky during NFL games to keep other birds away, but they were snatched on Sunday. NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz reports on the rush to get them back alive.
A mystery in Los Angeles. 2 trained hawks missing after they were stolen at SoFi Stadium during a LA Rams game.
I'm just exhausted. I'm so exhausted. I've been looking for them.
Falconer Charles says hawks, Alice and Bubba, patrol the skies above the stadium. It's a popular way to scare off aggressive seagulls, something that's long been a problem at outdoor sports venues nationwide, with birds making a mess on the crowd and snatching up food. But instead, he says 2 of his birds, Alice and Bubba, were snatched up themselves after a thief drove off in the vehicle where they were crated.
All the little hot dog vendors, and we're all just like, Charles, come on. That guy took your bird or took your cart.
According to police, the theft occurred Sunday, about an hour into the Rams game against the Indianapolis Colts, while Cogger was working with his 3rd hawk, aptly named Hope.
This all happened right here by the pond where the hawks patrol. Authorities say the car that was stolen has since been found abandoned a few miles away from here, but Alice and Bubba still missing.
Cogger says time is running out.
They're not getting anything to eat, and they can only go so many days without food and water before they go into what's called a crash mode. Today and tomorrow is like where it gets really critical.
The Harris Hawks are federally protected and cost about $1,000 each.
What is your message to the thief?
I just hope you do the right thing. That's the only hope I have left.
That they'll do the right thing and return the birds?
Yeah.
Cogger says there's now a reward offered if found.
And according to the owner, the birds had hoods on them, which keep them calm when they're in public situations like this and not working. But they also act as blinders, which would have made it very hard for them to fly away, hard for them to see, and hard for them to eat. If the thief did take those blinders off and they did fly away, their owner also says it's likely they wouldn't have gone very far, since these are birds that were raised in captivity. They likely would have found the nearest tree. The owner says he has been casing the neighborhood where that car was abandoned, looking for them, but so far no luck. They are missing still, and that suspect is still on the loose. Back to you.
We're back now with new details about a large asteroid that could be on a collision course with our moon. That dot on your screen is known as 2024 YR4, and according to experts, it has a 4.3% chance of hitting the moon in 2032. Now, researchers are considering options for stopping the collision, and those options include blowing it up with a nuclear explosion. For more on this, let's bring in Dr. Paul Sutter. He is a cosmologist at Johns Hopkins University and the author of the book, How to Die in Space. Okay, good morning. So this asteroid, 220 feet across, what kind of damage could it do if it were to hit the moon?
Yeah, 220 feet across. That's a little bit smaller than a football field. And to give you a sense of the energy of this kind of impact, because it's not just the size, 200 feet across, it's the speed. It's traveling at tens of thousands of miles per hour. That is an incredible amount of energy. The amount of energy released if it were to hit the moon is around a medium level nuclear warhead. That is how much energy is contained in the raw speed of these kinds of objects. So they're nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah. So scientists put the chances that this asteroid will actually strike the moon at just over 4%. Okay, so those seem like small odds, but if you think about it, a 4% chance, millions of people buy lottery tickets for way less odds than that. Is 4%, is that big when you're talking about space and asteroids?
Oh, absolutely. 4% is the largest number we've ever gotten ever since we've started tracking potential threats to the Earth and Moon system. 4% is huge. Normally, asteroids pass, millions of miles away. Space is gigantic. That's why they call it space, because there's so much of it. And so normally things don't even get within breathing distance. And for a 4% chance, like you said, that is huge. If I told you you had a 4% chance of winning the lottery if you buy your next ticket, you would go out and buy your next ticket. You absolutely would. That is huge. That is definitely something to pay attention to.
So in this paper, the researchers say that you could either do nothing, you could blow it up, I guess, with a nuclear bomb, or use some sort of device to steer it off course. How likely are those last two options, and what are the risks?
Right. So steering it off course is probably not going to be an option right now because we discovered it too late, even though it's not going to hit the moon until 2032. If you want to steer an asteroid by hitting it and shoving it off course, you have to do it way earlier. So we just don't have enough time to launch a mission and impart enough velocity to give it a change. So that leaves that second option, which is detonating a nuke, not to blow it up necessarily, but to detonate the nuke near the asteroid, again, to shove it off course, to give it enough energy to take it from 4% chance of hitting the moon to 4% chance of hitting the moon. The risks, of course, are one, launching a nuke into space, which understandably might make a bunch of people kind of twitchy. Right. And two, we've kind of never done this before, and so it might fragment. We might get the calculations wrong. So probably the safest bet is to just let it hit the moon, and we hold a competition to name the new crater.
Yeah, so the worst thing that could happen is a crater, right? I mean, could there be ramifications on Earth if the moon is struck?
Almost certainly not. Maybe a tiny piece of moon will get ejected and then fall to the Earth as a meteor, maybe as an outside chance. Other than that, you look at the moon, there are a lot of craters on the moon. This would just add to the pile.
All right, Dr. Paul Sutter, thanks so much. Fascinating stuff. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now. All right, good morning. I'm Christine Romans in for Joe in Savannah today. Right now on Morning News Now, no end in sight. The shutdown standoff in Washington rolling into its second day, with top lawmakers still in a stalemate after two more failed attempts to turn the government's lights back on. We'll bring you the very latest on where negotiations stand and the real-world impact that a potentially lengthy shutdown could have on federal workers. Also this morning, more tarmac turbulence. A pair of Delta regional jets colliding while taxiing at New York's LaGuardia Airport overnight. More on the federal investigation now underway, with the issue of safety on America's runways again taking center stage. Plus, trouble on the uneasy seas. A massive norovirus outbreak plaguing nearly 100 cruise ship passengers who are now docked in Miami. We'll bring you the stories from folks on board. And the CDC warns potential travelers sickness while sailing is back on the rise. And this morning, we're remembering a titan of the global conservation movement who whose tireless work to better understand the lives of wild chimpanzees went unrivaled for decades. Dr. Jane Goodall, gone at 91. We begin this hour with the Senate at a standstill on day 2 of the government shutdown. Yesterday, 2 procedural votes on Republican bills that would reopen the government failed to make it out of the chamber. And despite being closed for a little more than a day now, there are no signs of any progress being made to end the stalemate between lawmakers. This, as the White House says, mass layoffs of federal workers are, quote, imminent. NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has the latest from Washington.
Hey, Christine, good morning. Congress is not even in session today, so that means the earliest a possible vote on government funding will be tomorrow afternoon, guaranteeing the shutdown will extend into a third day, with both sides unwilling to compromise.
Day 2 of a federal government shutdown, and instead of searching for common ground, Republicans and Democrats are digging in.
Democrats in Congress have dragged our country into another reckless shutdown to satisfy their far-left base.
Donald Trump and Republicans shut the federal government down.
With jobs hanging in the balance, the administration has warned that many federal workers could be laid off rather than just being put on leave.
We believe that layoffs are imminent.
Now, Trump's budget chief, Russell Vought, telling House Republicans yesterday those firings could start in the next 1 to 2 days, according to 2 GOP sources. The White House also targeting funding for Democrat-run states soon after the shutdown began. Vought announcing he's freezing billions of dollars for transit in New York, the home of the 2 Democratic leaders, to ensure it's not based on, quote, DEI principles, and holding up climate funds for 16 states, mostly led by Democrats. While the pressure is on lawmakers to negotiate, Republicans are pushing a bill keeping the government open without concessions Democrats want. They need 5 Democrats to join them. 3 already have, including Nevada's Catherine Cortez Masto.
Do you think your leadership needs to do more to get in the room and start those conversations?
I think both sides. I think the American public is looking at Congress and saying, what are you doing?
Republicans pressuring moderate Democrats by claiming they are pushing for health care for undocumented immigrants.
What they have done instead is to shut down the government because we won't give billions of dollars to health care funding for illegal aliens.
But their accusation is dubious and refers to a small group of benefit recipients whose status is considered lawfully present. Federal law explicitly prohibits undocumented people from receiving aid.
That is a damn lie.
Meanwhile, frustration mounts for senators in search of a breakthrough.
I mean, if this isn't entertainment, and if it isn't entertainment, this is a really show.
And in addition to these public attacks, the Trump administration using taxpayer-funded government websites and social media accounts to go after Democrats, accusing them of being the ones responsible for shutting down the government. Christine?
All right, Ryan Nobles. Thanks, Ryan. With much of the federal government now shuttered, hundreds of thousands of people who keep the country moving and safe are expected to work without pay. That includes TSA workers. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello is at Reagan National Airport this morning with more on what they're saying about it.
Yeah, good day. So the chances are you will not yet see a big impact at the airport near you. TSA officers are working. However, if they go without one paycheck, if they miss a paycheck or a second paycheck, if history is any indication, you might see them starting to call out sick. And that would mean the lines at your local airport could start to grow. From the military to federal law enforcement, the Coast Guard, food inspectors, and the nation's airports, government workers are once again paying the price for Washington dysfunction.
I need that job. I need that paycheck. That's why I'm working multiple part-time jobs.
797 SoCal, radar contact, maintain 2000, 2 pounds run off.
13,000 air traffic controllers are now working without pay. Even more stress after years of mandatory overtime, with the FAA trying to hire more controllers and overhaul antiquated technology. During the 2019 shutdown, some controllers called out sick after 2 missed paychecks.
I wouldn't be surprised if it takes, another 20 to 30 minutes before we become airborne.
When flight delays began to mount, President Trump called off the shutdown. This morning, one veteran controller tells NBC News, "I think we're going to have a lot of controllers who are not going to be able to make it to work during the shutdown." 50,000 TSA officers are also working without a paycheck this morning. Average pay $45,000 to $50,000. For many, flashback to 5 years ago when they couldn't afford their rent, food, or the bus fare to get to work. The union warns it could be bad again.
These are real people's lives. This is real things that are happening to folks.
Meanwhile, the nation's parks and many museums are closed. Tourists locked out.
We're supposed to see the Smithsonian museums today.
Food pantries are preparing for families who depend on suspended food programs.
We know we've got to be ready because we know our kids need to eat.
Medical research at the NIH shut down.
Because if we don't have scientists working on research today, we lose tomorrow's cures.
In a city very good at finger pointing, it's gotten personal.
There's plenty of blame to go around.
Back here in D.C., a federal city, marriage licenses are not being issued right now, but the courts are in fact running. One very important warning from cybersecurity experts saying, be careful, be skeptical. This is a time when you might get fraudsters and criminals trying to prey on people, taking advantage of the shutdown. Be suspicious of any emails or phone calls in which they're trying to get personal information or money from you, citing the shutdown. They say it likely is a scam. Back to you.
All right, Tom. Thanks, Tom. The Trump administration continues to ramp up its use of federal troops in Democratic-run cities. Dozens of federal law enforcement officers are now helping patrol the streets of Memphis. The defense secretary and attorney general are also on the ground to tout the mission to fight crime in that city. This comes as troops are also heading to Portland, Oregon. NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins now with the latest on this. Gabe, good morning.
Christine, good morning. The Trump administration says the federal officers deployed to Memphis have already made dozens of arrests. But with the defense secretary also visiting the city, critics are questioning the military's role in local policing.
This morning, new federal forces are on the streets of Memphis as the Trump administration ramps up its focus on crime in Democratic-led cities.
I see the guns in this room. You are unleashed. The handcuffs that you're carrying, they're not on you anymore. They're on the criminals.
Attorney General Pam Bondi and Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth visiting some 200 federal law enforcement officers that have arrived in Memphis. The president had already sent thousands of National Guard troops to Los Angeles and Washington, D.C.
Whether it's the southwest border, whether it was Los Angeles, whether it's Washington, D.C., our department is proud to stand shoulder to shoulder right next to law enforcement while you do your job.
Memphis had the highest violent crime rate in the nation last year, according to data compiled by the FBI, though local leaders insist that crime is down this year.
It's not something that I asked for. It's not something that I thought is the best way to reduce crime.
And after a politically charged speech to military leaders this week,
we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military.
The president posting the National Guard is now in place in Portland, Oregon. Two defense officials tell NBC News those troops are currently processing and training before they start their mission. Oregon's governor, a Democrat, says the planned deployment could cost taxpayers $10 million over the next 60 days. The state's attorney general and the city of Portland are suing the Trump administration, arguing it's illegal for the military to take part in domestic law enforcement.
The justification for their presence in our cities is either a misunderstanding or a lie.
The federal government now filing its own lawsuit alleging 4 Oregon counties have not cooperated with immigration agents. Christine?
Okay, thanks so much for that, Gabe. Turning to the skies, authorities are now investigating another close call involving passenger planes. This latest incident involving 2 Delta airline regional planes that clipped each other last night while taxiing at LaGuardia Airport here in New York. One plane was set to depart, the other was arriving. One minor injury was reported. NBC News correspondent Sam Brock joins me now from LaGuardia Airport with the details. Sam, what happened?
Yeah, certainly some scary visuals from last night, Christine. This happened just before 10 o'clock. According to Delta, you had the wing of a departing plane that was headed to Roanoke, Virginia, that was taxiing at the time, and it ends up clipping the nose and the cockpit of an arriving plane from Charlotte. It is not entirely clear how this all happened, Christine, but they do tell us that there were more than 80 passengers on board those 2 different aircraft. All of them are okay. Just one minor injury, apparently, at this point, and that's a flight attendant. This morning, an investigation is underway to determine what caused a low-speed collision between two Delta regional commuter planes.
We have two CRJs on mic that collided.
It happened on the tarmac at New York's LaGuardia Airport as one plane was taxiing to the gate after landing while the other was preparing to take off. The impact leaving the cockpit of one of the planes severely damaged.
With our nose in the cockpit, we have damage to our windscreen and some of our screens in here. We have engines running still. We'd like to shut them down while we can.
Delta reporting that the wing of the departing aircraft made contact with the fuselage of the arriving plane. That collision causing a minor injury to a flight attendant, but otherwise, the airline says all 85 passengers on board the two planes were not hurt. In a statement, Delta apologizing to its customers for the experience, saying it plans to work with all relevant authorities to review what occurred, as the safety of their customers and people comes before all else. The Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, which runs LaGuardia, says the accident did not impact operations at the airport. As this collision, just the latest in a string of incidents at airports nationwide, putting tarmac and air traffic control safety under the spotlight. Within the last week, a Delta flight was forced to abort a takeoff at Hartsfield-Jackson Airport in Atlanta after one of its engines caught fire. While at Seattle-Tacoma Airport in February, a Japan Airlines plane sliced through the tail of a parked Delta jet while taxiing. And Christine, we did reach out to both the FAA and the NTSB. The NTSB tells us they're in the process of collecting information right now and still determining next steps. As you mentioned at the top of the segment, the FAA is actually investigating. We learned just hours ago they've launched a formal investigation. And by the way, investigators for both agencies are required to continue work. They're considered essential workers during this federal shutdown. Christine?
Yeah. All of this happening amid a shutdown. Thank you so much for that, Sam Brock. This morning, we're learning more about a major norovirus outbreak on a popular cruise ship. Almost 100 passengers and crew fell ill on Royal Caribbean's Serenade of the Seas during its 13-day voyage from San Diego to Miami. NBC News correspondent Marissa Parra joins me now from the port of Miami, where that ship just docked. Marissa, good morning.
Christine, good morning. Whatever you call it, whether it's norovirus, otherwise known as the stomach flu, certainly not a pleasant way to spend a vacation. But as you mentioned, that cruise ship just docked a couple of hours ago. In fact, we were just downstairs there as passengers were disembarking, telling us their stories. All of this, as the CDC says, illnesses like this on cruise ships like this are on the rise.
This morning, a dream cruise sailing to a choppy ending after a norovirus outbreak.
I've been staying in my room because I don't want to get sick.
The CDC says at least 94 passengers and 4 crew members aboard Royal Caribbean Serenade of the Seas battled the bug during the voyage, including Bob Pattis, who was on the 13-day cruise with his son.
I'm 87 years old. I've never been this sick in my life.
The highly contagious virus, commonly referred to as the stomach flu, can cause days of vomiting, gastrointestinal problems, and fever. In the final days of the trip, those sick were quarantined, while the cruise line says it implemented, quote, rigorous cleaning procedures. Passengers on board taking note.
Royal Caribbean's doing everything they possibly can to eradicate it.
The ship docking in Miami this morning as scheduled, becoming this year's 19th gastrointestinal illness outbreak on a cruise ship so far, sailing past the total number seen in 2024, according to the CDC, and making it the worst year for cruise outbreaks in more than a decade. The illness spreads by touching contaminated objects, consuming contaminated food or drinks, or coming in direct contact with someone with the virus, making high-traffic areas like those found on cruise ships hotbeds for infection.
If somebody has a highly contagious virus, it's much easier for it to spread. It's the kind of situation that makes managing contagious diseases very challenging.
Keep in mind, hand sanitizer does not kill norovirus. Experts say the best defense is simple. A thorough hand washing with soap and water can be its own life raft.
Now, due to a couple of factors, including the fact that the outbreak started in the middle of the voyage, experts believe that the actual number of cases is higher than what is being reported, including the fact that people need to self-report their symptoms, Christine. So while there are no travel restrictions for anyone who does have norovirus, experts and the CDC advise people who do have symptoms to self-quarantine, because it's not only polite, probably also not a pleasant experience to travel with that, Christine.
Exactly. All right, Marissa, thank you so much for that. Time now for weather. It could be a rainy weekend there in Florida. NBC meteorologist Angie Lastman is here with your Morning News Now forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hi, Christine. Good morning to you. We're so close to the weekend, but unfortunately, if you're planning on being out and about in the Sunshine State, you're not going to get a whole lot of sunshine. We've got a couple of days of unsettled weather ahead of us for folks there, and it's already started along the East Coast for that region. You can see Daytona Beach stretching down to Fort Lauderdale, some showers, some thunderstorms kind of hugging that East Coast. And that's going to be the general kind of trend that we see as we go through essentially the next couple of days. Through the day today, much of that onshore flow brings in the showers and thunderstorms. They'll track across the peninsula. So the locally heavy downpours will be there today, tomorrow, Saturday, Sunday. And that leaves us with the concern for some flash flooding. It likely will be isolated, but when you look ahead to even Sunday and tally up all that rainfall, we could be talking upwards of 3 to 5 inches, and in isolated spots, higher amounts than that. So this is why we're concerned for the flooding through the next couple of days, and especially if you live really along the East Coast, anywhere from southern parts of Georgia all the way down to South Florida. That's where we'll see those highest rainfall amounts close to the coast. Meanwhile, we're almost done with Hurricane Imelda. It is still hanging on to its Category 1 strength. We've got winds at 80 miles per hour, but the better news for our friends in Bermuda is that this system is pulling away. They went through essentially the worst of it into the overnight hours, and even early this morning, we've started to see things kind of improve, and that'll happen here as we go through the rest of the day. Still dealing with some gusty winds, still seeing some remnant rain across that region, but now we're going to be talking about Imelda pulling away and eventually weakening in the coming days. So things will, of course, improve for Bermuda. Meanwhile, we've still got a couple of areas that we're going to watch here now moving forward. Neither of them have a great chance of developing, at least in the long term. We've got 20% chance of this tropical wave that's coming off of Africa to slowly develop. So that'll be something we watch into next week. And then, of course, just off the coast of Florida, just a 10% chance of a low forming there as it moves northwest over the coming days. So we'll be watching all of that. Of course, it's peak hurricane season, so to be expected. We have had some improvements when it comes to the frost and freeze advisories and watches and warnings that have been up all morning across New England, too. So we're seeing some improvement there, although I still would recommend that you grab an extra layer if you're heading out in any of these regions. Notice the 30s out there. We've got some low 40s. Closer to the coast, temperatures are hovering into those mid 40s, so feeling much like October for our friends in New England. Very different story if you look to anywhere from the Rockies to Ohio Valley, including the Midwest, the Plains. We are dealing with summer-like temperatures. It feels more like early September or late August across this region, with 86 degrees for Minneapolis. That temperature more than 20 degrees above where we should be for early October. So still that last taste of summer, but it's not just today. If you don't have time to get out and enjoy the warmth today, then you've got another chance at it tomorrow. And we potentially could be talking about some record-breaking warmth across some of those areas, specifically the Midwest, stretching into the northern plains, central plains as well. But we've got 90s for Wichita Falls, Austin, Jackson will top out into the mid 80s. And we really don't see any cool down, or at least significant cool down in the long term. We get through the weekend, still upper 80s in places like Chicago, St. Louis, Memphis. And then we kind of see things a little cooler, I suppose we could say, if you look towards Washington, D.C., Christine, where upper 70s are on tap for Saturday and Sunday. But summer holding on for a little bit longer.
I'm going to pretend it's summer for one more weekend, Angie. Thank you, Angie Lastman. All right, this morning we remember Dr. Jane Goodall, the pioneering scientist and conservationist who spent decades teaching us about chimpanzees, nature, and our responsibility to protect them. She dedicated her life to the planet, and even in her final days, she was urging us all to do the same. Goodall died at the age of 91 of natural causes. NBC News correspondent Ann Thompson joins me now to look back at her extraordinary life. I mean,
this is one of the times where the word extraordinary
doesn't
fit. I mean, she was just incredible. Talk about somebody, Christine, who really made a difference in this world. Jane Goodall was both a scientist and a teacher, and she traveled 300 days a year well into her 90s to inspire everyone she met to do more to preserve the earth and the bounty from which we all benefit. And it all started with her love for chimpanzees.
Hello, me Jane.
Jane Goodall could seemingly talk to the chimpanzees, mesmerizing and educating the world about these once mysterious primates. Her adventure began in 1960. With little scientific training and accompanied by her mom, the then 26-year-old Goodall went to Tanzania to observe and study the great apes. She discovered the chimps made and used tools, ate meat, and fought wars, changing the way we looked at these animals forever. She opened up about her efforts on Today.
Thanks to you, we know that the chimps are most similar to us, DNA-wise, emotionally.
One thing the chimpanzees have helped to do is to open science's closed mind to understanding we're part of and not separated from this amazing animal kingdom.
A frequent guest on Today over the years, Goodall passionately promoted her conservation work, emphasizing to Jenna and Hoda how we could all make the world a better place.
Yeah, because the little things, when you multiply them by hundreds, thousands, millions, probably eventually billions, lead to a better world.
For her research, Goodall was knighted by Prince Charles in 2004 and awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom by President Biden earlier this year. On social media, an outpouring of love and mourning. The United Nations, to which Goodall was named a messenger of peace, writing that she worked tirelessly for our planet and all its inhabitants, leaving an extraordinary legacy for humanity and nature. Even last week, she was here in New York pushing for change. A 7-decade-long love affair that she never wanted to end.
It's really important to get the message out. Slow down, Jane, you're 90. I've got to speed up because I don't know how many years left I have.
Now, my favorite fact about Jane Goodall is that she was awarded a PhD from Cambridge University without ever earning an undergraduate degree. In fact, her only schooling after high school was she went to secretarial school. She was married twice, and she is survived by her son Hugo and 3 grandchildren, along with her sister Judy, who has the same birthday as Jane. She's just 2 years younger.
Icon is overused. She definitely is an icon.
It defines it.
Yeah. All right. Thanks so much, Ann. Joining us now to continue the conversation on Jane Goodall's legacy is Jeff Corwin. He is a conservationist and TV host. He had the privilege of working closely with Jane Goodall. Jeff, good morning. Thank you so much for coming and talking to us about the woman that you know. In the announcement of her passing, the Jane Goodall Institute said her discoveries, quote, revolutionized science. As a pioneer in wildlife conservation, how do you think, Jeff, she'll be remembered?
Well, it's an understatement, Christine, to call her a pioneer, because she really was a revolutionary, iconic person who changed the world. So, just think of this. Her journey began in Gombe, in this remote forest in Tanzania, way back in the 1960s. So she led the way for women when it came to opening the doors as scientists, explorers, and researchers. She totally changed our viewpoint on ethology, which is the study of animal behavior, specifically when it comes to chimpanzees. And then she used that as a platform to pivot to become the ultimate leader in conservation, and then go forward many decades more to where we are today. And here she is in her 90s, traveling the world 360 days a year, filling amphitheaters, encouraging the next generation as a pop idol. She actually had a Barbie doll because of all her influential work in changing our mindset when it comes to nature. For me as a child, growing up in a triple-decker outside of Boston, when I was a little boy, 8 years old, I had that National Geographic with Jane Goodall on the cover. And that, for me, was my inspiration to become the person I am today. And to have that moment in my career where I've been able to work with her. I remember one time I was in a studio doing voiceovers, and I got a call, and they said, Jeff, Jane Goodall's on the phone. And I was speaking about Jane, and she was asking me to make sure I was going to be doing a good job with her in this project. And I had my 3-year-old daughter with me in my lap, and I said, Jane, would you speak to my daughter? And I would be delighted to. And for me, those moments, Christine, I remember one time I had to go meet with my GM for a network that I worked with. It was Animal Planet. And I was about to do this project with Jane Goodall. And I was afraid I was going to go in there and she was going to say, Jeff, Jane doesn't want to work with you. She doesn't like your style. And I walked into that room and she said, Jeff, Jane pointed to your poster and said, this guy is doing good work. I can't wait to work with
Amazing.
him. I was walking on cloud nine.
Amazing. I know. She did a children's book a number of years ago, and she came into the studio and we interviewed her. I interviewed her, and the line of people in the hallway who were waiting just to talk to her, to say hi, just to meet her, like a rock star, you know, honestly, like a rock star. So many people wanted to just be close to her. You worked with her on her Roar with Jane campaign in 2015. You helped raise money for the Jane Goodall Institute's chimpanzee sanctuary. And she asked you to be a keynote speaker of her organization's Roots and Shoots. What was it like working with her?
Well, it was incredible. First of all, she was very personable. She was very approachable. While at the same time, she was a person that was very driven. She was a very small, I would say, deceptively delicate looking in appearance, but she was a force, an absolute force. At the other part, the other side of her, if you flip the Jane Goodall coin, was that she loved young people. She would go on stage with a chimpanzee doll, a little stuffed plushy doll, and she used that as a way to remove that austere veneer of science, to say, I'm just like you. I love animals, and together we can make that connection. So part of me, although very sad that she is gone, is incredibly inspired by how she broke that door and she made those great changes. But I'm also very sad because she leaves this world today with all her great work, knowing there's so much work, Christine, that needs to be done when it comes to saving our wild planet. And one could argue that we are at a much darker stage when it comes to saving our natural treasures than we were just a decade ago.
Amazing. Jeff Corwin, thank you so much for bringing us your memories of Jane Goodall.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now, including continuing coverage of that ongoing federal shutdown and how it could impact critical access to food for thousands of furloughed government workers. Up next, though, breaking news out of England, a horrific stabbing attack at a Manchester synagogue, claiming the lives of at least 2 people. The suspect shot dead by police as all Jews across the globe celebrate Yom Kippur. We've got the latest next. All right, we're back with details of a deadly car and stabbing attack at a synagogue in England on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar. Police now confirming 2 people have died in the attack on the Heaton Park Synagogue in Manchester earlier this morning. 3 others are injured, and a person believed to be the suspect is also dead after he was shot by police. According to Manchester's mayor, police were called to the scene by someone who witnessed a car being driven toward members of the public there and saw one man stabbed. NBC News international correspondent Raf Sanchez is in London with the latest. Raf, good morning. Bring us up to speed first on the latest on the ground there. Do we know anything more about the victims or the suspect?
Christine, good morning. Yeah, this is a fast-moving situation, but here's what we know at this point. Police up in Manchester are saying around 9:31 a.m. local time, they got calls from members of the public saying that someone had rammed a car into people outside of that synagogue, jumped out and begun stabbing them. Now, within 7 minutes, police were on the scene, and they say they shot the suspect there outside of the synagogue. At this point, they are saying 2 victims are dead, 3 more are injured in serious condition. And they are saying that the suspect is believed to have been killed. And the reason, Christine, that they cannot be sure at this stage is there are what police are describing as suspicious objects around the suspect. There are concerns those potentially could be explosives. They have called in the bomb squad. So at this point, they are not able to get close enough to the body or to the person of this suspect to ascertain for sure whether they are dead, but they are saying they believe the suspect is dead. At this point, the attacker has not been identified, so we don't know for sure the motivation. But obviously, the fact that this happened outside of a synagogue, it is being treated as a potential anti-Semitic attack. And as you mentioned, it happened on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the Jewish calendar.
Raf, Prime Minister Keir Starmer flying back to the UK to chair a meeting of the government's emergency committee. What have lawmakers in the UK said about this?
Yeah, so Prime Minister Starmer was actually overseas. He was in Denmark dealing with NATO business, and he cut that trip short to return to Britain to chair a meeting of what's called COBRA, which is the British state's emergency committee. He released a statement a little earlier, and I just want to read you part of it. He said, "I'm appalled by the attack at the synagogue in Crumpsall. The fact that this is taking place on Yom Kippur, the holiest day in the Jewish calendar, makes it all the more horrific. My thoughts are with the loved ones of all those affected, and my thanks go to the emergency services and all the first responders." And Christine, in just the last couple of minutes, we have also heard from King Charles. He is saying that both he and Queen Camilla are appalled by what's happened and that they are praying for both the people injured and thankful to the emergency services for responding so quickly. Christine.
And Raf, this comes as rising tensions are impacting Jewish communities in the UK and around the world. What is expected to happen in the coming days?
Well, so we have seen just this grim pattern, Christine, which is that when there is violence in the Middle East, when there is violence in Gaza, there are also increased threats against Jewish communities around the world, in the United States, in Europe, and in other places. This appears to be one of the most serious actual attacks we have seen on a Jewish community since the beginning of the Gaza war back in October of 2023. And it is something you're hearing worldwide, that when there is conflict in the Middle East, there is rising tension aimed often at Jewish communities abroad. Christine.
All right, Raf Sanchez, keep us up to speed on any developments. Thanks. To the Middle East now, aid organizers say Israeli forces intercepted more than a dozen Gaza-bound aid boats, sparking international outcry. NBC News international correspondent Claudio Lavanga joins me now from Rome with our World News in 60 seconds. Good morning, Claudio.
Good morning, Savannah. Well, that's right. The organizers of the flotilla said that at this point, the Israeli forces have intercepted and stopped most, if not all, of the more than 40 boats taking part in it. Now, the Israeli Foreign Ministry confirmed that those on board, including Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, were transferred to an Israeli port. The interception triggered protests and condemnation around the globe, including here in Rome, where thousands of demonstrators took to the streets Wednesday evening. Let's go to the south of Denmark now, where authorities say the French military arrested the captain and first officer of a tanker suspected of being used by Russia to bypass EU sanctions and of having served as a launch pad for the drones that caused disruption last week in Copenhagen. The tanker's captain and his deputy were arrested on charges of refusing to obey a summons and failing to justify the ship's nationality. And let's end this tour of the world in Afghanistan, where the internet and telecom services are back after a 48 hours blackout. The outage disrupted businesses and flights, limited access to emergency services, but also cut communications among Afghans and with the outside world. The Taliban government claimed a major technical disruption was to blame, but last week officials in the country's north announced a ban to prevent immoral activities.
All right, Claudio, thank you. Coming up, bracing for impact. When Morning News Now returns, we'll take you back to the nation's capital with a look at how local food banks are preparing for a spike in demand as federal workers want to wait to go back to work if their jobs are still there. On the other side, that's next. We're back now with a closer look at what's making news in the world of politics this morning, starting with a legal reprieve for Federal Reserve Board member Lisa Cook. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona joins me now with more. Good morning.
Good morning, Christine. We begin with a development in the ongoing saga over whether President Trump can fire a board member on the Federal Reserve. Lisa Cook has challenged Trump's attempt to oust her from the Fed. The High Court on Wednesday agreed to hear oral arguments in the case early next year, with a ruling likely before the end of next June. The move means Cook can remain in office while the consequential legal question is decided. Since taking office in January, Trump has pushed for lower interest rates and criticized the Fed for failing to act on his wishes. Under the Federal Reserve Act, presidents can only remove governors for cause, meaning evidence of wrongdoing. Next, Trump is backing down from one of his tariff threats. Last week, Trump threatened to levy triple-digit tariffs on pharmaceutical imports. But now the White House says it may not need to enact those duties. According to a White House official, the Trump administration has hit the pause button on its tariff plans while it attempts to negotiate lower drug pricing agreements with pharmaceutical giants. The White House has been buoyed by a deal it struck with Pfizer earlier this week to lower the cost of some of the company's medicines. And finally, a controversial congressman is launching a comeback bid. Former Republican member Madison Cawthorn, who represented a North Carolina district for 2 years, has filed to run for an open seat in Florida. The 30-year-old lost his primary in 2022 amid a swirl of politically damaging headlines. And he infamously accused his fellow Republican colleagues of participating in cocaine-fueled orgies, setting off a firestorm in Washington. Cawthorn announced his decision in an interview with Fox News, saying the Charlie Kirk assassination is what inspired him to run for public office again. But sources told me that Cawthorn had actually been eyeing the seat for quite a while. And that's what's making news in politics this morning. Christine?
All right. Thanks, Melanie. As the government shutdown continues with no clear end in sight, food banks across the nation's capital are bracing for a spike in demand. Last week, Capital Area Food Bank released its 2025 hunger report. It revealed that 41% of households affected by federal layoffs and DOGE spending cuts earlier this year are already dealing with food insecurity. Now, the nonprofit could be asked to provide millions more meals if Congress can't end this stalemate soon. For more on this, let's bring in Radha Mathia. She's the CEO of Capital Area Food Bank in Washington. Radha, thank you so much for joining me this morning. You have such a big job in normal, calm times, and now you've got a government shutdown. The last time we had one in 2018, it lasted more than a month. For more than a month, workers went without pay. And this time, we're hearing from White House officials that they plan to lay off hundreds of thousands of federal workers instead of having them work without pay. What kind of stress will that put on food banks this year, even after you've been dealing with these DOGE cuts, and what are you preparing for?
Sure. Thank you for having me. Federal government workers and contractors across the country are being impacted by this shutdown and may not be able to put food on their tables as a result. So food banks like ours across the country are really trying to step up. And we have already seen an elevated level of need across our various communities over the last 12 months. You highlighted the hunger report. 36% of those across the greater Washington area needed some help at one point or another putting food on the table. So this federal government shutdown now comes on top of this elevated level of need that we've been seeing for over a year now.
So how do emergency situations like this one affect local and regional food banks? I mean, it's a different need than the regular food assistance programs and operations.
It is different, you're right. And in order for us to be ready, we have to stay ready throughout the year. And so for us, that means a few different things. First, we need to monitor events like policy shifts that could have a disproportionate effect on one population versus another. Second, we need to understand which parts of our region may be most affected. Third, we need to ensure that we have an adequate food supply to be able to provide. And finally, we don't do this work alone. We work with hundreds of community partners across the region. And we need to make sure that we're well coordinated so we can get food to those who need it the most.
Who is the most affected by food insecurity in Washington?
In the greater Washington area, we see women, households with children, those who are Black and Hispanic are households who are affected the most. And this year, as you just indicated earlier, we see a disproportionate number of former federal government workers and contractors who are in need of extra assistance to put food on their tables.
I mean, if you just look at the cost of living increase over the past 5 years or so, since the last time there was a government shutdown, baseline prices are just much, much higher. If you're talking about a period of weeks with a government worker not getting a paycheck, the money doesn't last. You still have to pay all those bills.
That's exactly right. What we've seen over the last few years is that wages have not kept pace with the cost of living in our area, and for that matter, in many parts across the country. And so what happens here is that many families, federal government workers and contractors included, are living paycheck to paycheck and barely being able to make ends meet. So now, if they miss a paycheck, they suddenly go from a place of financial sustainability to financial strain. And often one doesn't negotiate your rent or your child care payments or transportation. So that line item budget in the budget that gets cut is the food one. And that's when we start to see people needing extra support, putting food on their tables.
Yeah, those expenses you just listed are all much higher today than they were the last time the government shut down. You know, the government has also cut hundreds of billions of dollars in funding for assistance programs like SNAP, which we used to call food stamps. What needs to be done to help Americans who might lose access to nutritious meals due to these cuts?
It is a very important time for us to come together as citizens, as organizations, to be able to advocate and work closely with our state government, our county governments, to do precisely what you just said, help people who qualify stay on food stamps, and to help individuals acquire and fill out those applications. Often the paperwork is quite unwieldy. There's a role that we can all play in helping individuals get the benefits that they're entitled to. Second, we also need to ensure that we understand there's a close connection between food, nutrition, and health. So good nutrition supports better health. Better health supports individuals being able to return to work. So we really need to make sure initiatives that bundle food and health, food as medicine, are ones that are supported. And finally, we need to ensure, especially in our area, those who are transitioning from jobs and with the federal government or contractors have the skills that they need to be able to work in the private sector. And so close collaboration between community organizations and the private sector are critical to ensure a smooth transition so people can become financially stable and food secure again.
All right, Rada Muthaya, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, the digital disarray that's now got some Americans hurling blame at each other for hot tempers and sky-high tensions nationwide. After the break, we'll dig into the role many people say social media may be playing in a deeper divide that seems to be ramping up. That's next. Stay with us. Welcome back. You may have noticed it feels like tensions across the U.S. have never been higher, from political violence to attacks on federal facilities. Well, a growing number of Americans say the biggest threat isn't coming from overseas, but from each other. Now many wonder whether social media could be making that divide even worse and even profiting from it. NBC News Now anchor Kate Snow joins me now with more. Kate, good morning.
Good morning, Christine. There was a New York Times poll out this week that found that division and polarization was cited as the second most important problem facing the country today following the economy. And experts say social media may be fueling that divide.
Is it just me, or does it feel like the TikTok algorithm is just like calibrated for like rage bait?
If it feels like your feed is designed to make you mad, you're not alone. Some creators say the apps seem built to reward outrage.
Nothing has made as much sense to me as rage baiting. My TikToks with the most views are all about like controversial topics or things that got people talking.
People love the rage bait. They love to argue. It's just how this app works. It's what this app thrives on.
Each social media app has unique algorithms that calculate what to show you next based on whether you like, comment, or share a post.
The downside, at the end of the day, everything just goes to the most terrible types of things that human nature will be attracted to. Explosions. We're going to look at train crashes. We're going to look at whatever grabs our attention and gets that dopamine hit instantly.
In a 2018 internal presentation at Facebook, the company now known as Meta warned, our algorithms exploit the human brain's attraction to divisiveness. Entrepreneur, podcast host, and Professor Scott Galloway is a lead commentator in the tech space.
What the algorithms figured out is there's something better than sex, and that's rage.
A study published this year found X's algorithm appeared to boost posts that were more emotional and partisan, especially hostile content about people you disagree with.
Enragement equals engagement equals more ads equals more shareholder value.
On a shareholder call this summer, Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg touted the company's ability to hold your attention.
AI is significantly improving our ability to show people content that they're going to find interesting and useful. It has led to a 5% increase in time spent on Facebook and 6% on Instagram just this quarter.
But interesting and useful can sometimes lead users to dark places.
You think these companies are intentionally pushing rage at us?
I think it's errors of omission, not commission. They have ignored what is obvious here, and that is the more time you spend online, the more likely you are to engage in misogynistic, nationalistic, or kind of violent content. So they know this. They've known it for a long time. Basically, the whistleblowers at Meta all said the same thing, that they purposely ignored the data.
In 2021, former Facebook product manager Frances Haugen testified at a House hearing that Facebook prioritized profits over tackling problematic content.
The result is a system that amplifies division, extremism, and polarization.
Meta, the parent company for Facebook and Instagram, has long denied that, and they point to 2023 studies showing their apps do not cause polarization.
I believe that the division we see today is primarily the result of a political and media environment that drives Americans apart.
Regardless of the cause, the divide is deeply felt. A 2024 post-election survey found 81% of Democrats viewed Republicans as a serious threat to the country, while 69% of Republicans said the same about Democrats.
If America were a horror movie, the call is coming from inside of the House. People are convinced that Russians pouring over the border in Ukraine or income inequality or climate change isn't the threat. It's their neighbor that doesn't share their political views.
Meta and TikTok declined to comment on the record for this piece, but Meta users can go into their settings and adjust how much sensitive content they want to see. X told us they are shifting their own algorithm to be fully AI controlled by November. Elon Musk posted that you'll be able to ask their AI chatbot called Grok to tweak the algorithm, Christine, if you don't like what you're seeing on X.
It's one of the reasons why so many people are taking like little social media timeouts, just to like refocus, to be like, hold on, wait a minute, and just to remind yourself where you're kind of going.
Yes, no, I think that's such a good idea for all of us, myself included, right? Just take a break sometimes.
Absolutely. Kate, great reporting. Thank you. Let's take a look at what's making news on Wall Street. Protein giant Tyson Foods is agreeing to pay up in a multi-million-dollar consumer lawsuit settlement. CNBC's Silvana Henao joins me now with that. And other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Christine, good morning. Yeah, so Tyson Foods agreed to pay $85 million to settle a class action lawsuit, claiming the company worked with rivals to artificially inflate pork prices by limiting supply. Now, Tyson is the last publicly traded company to settle the matter. The overall recovery for the lawsuit now stands at $208 million and includes settlements from Hormel Foods and other defendants. Tyson did not respond to a request for comment, and the settlement still needs approval from a judge. Microsoft raised the price of its Xbox Game Pass Ultimate subscription again. So it is now $29.99 per month instead of $19.99 a month. Microsoft is trying to justify that 50% increase by adding more games across each of its subscription plans. And it says more than 400 games are now available in the Ultimate tier. And True Fruit announced a recall of some of its popular fruit products because they may contain metal. Now, these were distributed in the U.S. at a number of retailers, including Kroger, CVS, Food Lion, and Target. The affected products include freeze-dried strawberries in dark and white chocolate and freeze-dried strawberries and cream. Federal regulators warn the metal could cause cuts or internal punctures, Christine.
All right, Silvana, thank you for that. Important to note. Coming up, we're taking you inside New York's hottest new club. And no, it is not a dark, dingy warehouse with thumping beats and dancing and cool kids. It's a special kind of social club that's bringing folks together over the nostalgia of backgammon. We'll explain up next. And finally this hour, one centuries-old game is having an unexpected comeback among young adults. Backgammon social clubs are popping up across the U.S. as generations turn to this game in search of like real-life connections. NBC News correspondent Valerie Castro went to one of those clubs here in New York.
New York's hottest club is a boardroom, but not the kind you might think. These 20 and 30-somethings are gathering once a week for drinks, vibes, and backgammon. The game of both strategy and luck dates back centuries and has historically been associated with old Hollywood.
Double sixes.
Bond villains.
Fancy that.
And megastars of the past. But the tables have turned. Backgammon social clubs are popping up across the country as the centuries-old game takes on a new life.
It used to be just like a couple of grandpas getting together and playing on a Friday night.
Remington Davenport is the founder of NYC Backgammon Club and says her love for the game stems all the way back to 6th grade.
In middle school, I had a group of 6 girlfriends, and we played every weekend. And we were incredibly competitive, and we were totally obsessed.
Now she's on a mission to get a backgammon board in every bar, restaurant, and home. Since founding the club in 2023, Davenport has hosted more than 250 events with thousands of players in attendance.
When I was looking for somewhere to play in New York City, I just felt like there was nowhere very appealing for me to play. Usually it's an older crowd. There was basically no women, and there was really no one in their 20s or 30s.
Young people drawn to clubs like this one in search of real-life connections and a wholesome hobby.
Every week, I feel like I make new friends, and then you see people come back again, and you catch up with them.
Honestly, we had an all-girls event a couple of days ago, and it was so amazing to meet a ton of girls.
The triangles and checkers might seem intimidating at first, but the nature of the game lending itself to newbies like me.
Okay, so now you roll. Okay, 2-1.
That's lame.
It's not as exciting, yes, I will admit.
For some, it sparked an unexpected passion.
Are you a little bit obsessed with it now?
Yeah, so a year and a half ago, right, I started playing a lot more in the social events and things like that. And yeah, I probably play once a week.
For others, it's led to a life-changing win.
I've had a couple that met at my club and they got married. Oh my gosh. And so that's been one of the greatest gifts of all time. And I have another couple that met and they are just about to move in together. So I try not to get emotional, but it's that's what it's about. You're meant to meet people, and I think it's great. Sorry, I'm totally emotional.
Who knew this was a romantic game, right?
Yeah, who knew, honestly.
Backgammon no longer ancient history as a new generation of young players roll the dice. Valerie Castro, NBC News.
And that does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now.
We thank you for watching, and remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.